The White House press room buzzed with anticipation. Reporters clutched their tablets, microphones stood ready, and camera operators signaled the countdown. The recent 145% tariff on Chinese goods, declared just 2 days ago by President Trump, had ignited a global storm. Allies were shocked, adversaries were rattled, and America was divided. At the center of it all stood Karoline Leavitt, 30, sharp as ever, stepping up to the podium in a clean navy blue dress. Her stride was confident, her notes minimal. She didn't need a script. She had facts, instincts, and the full backing of the President of the United States. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen," Karoline began. "As you know, President Trump's recent tariffs are about protecting American industry, revitalizing domestic manufacturing, and ending our reliance on hostile economies. We're not just talking about trade, this is about sovereignty." A few reporters nodded. Others grimaced. The room was a powder keg. Then it happened. From the third row, Clara Winslow, a well-known liberal journalist from Global Daily Network, GDN, rose. Clara was sharp-tongued, viral on social media, and had built a reputation for her gotcha moments. "Ms. Leavitt," she said sweetly, microphone in hand, "how do you justify this trade war when you're literally wearing a dress that was made in China?" The room gasped. A few muffled chuckles. A couple of camera shutters clicked. Karoline paused, just for a second. She scanned Clara's smug expression. Her eyes narrowed, but her lips curled into a smile. She leaned toward the mic. "Clara," Karoline began, her voice smooth but icy, "thank you for your question and your fashion critique." Laughter rippled through the room. "But I think it's time someone taught you the difference between mockery and substance. So let me walk you through it, step by step." The press room shifted. Clara smirked, arms crossed. She had her moment, and she thought Karoline would shrink under pressure. Oh, how wrong she was. Karoline continued, "You're right. This dress was made in China. It was purchased years ago, long before these tariffs were even imagined. I wear it because it fits, and because I'm not in the business of throwing away clothes just to virtue signal." A pause. "But more importantly, your insult proves exactly why these tariffs are necessary. You just shamed me for wearing a Chinese-made product, and yet you mock the very action we're taking to stop that dependency." The laughter stopped. Now everyone was listening. "You see, Clara, Americans have been trapped in a cycle for decades. Cheap goods, outsourced labor, and fading industries. Presidents came and went. Speeches were made. Nothing changed. Until now." Karoline pointed directly at Clara. "You mocked my dress to make a point. I'm turning that mockery into a movement. Because we don't just want Americans to stop wearing Chinese-made dresses, we want them to have American-made options they can actually afford. That's what these tariffs are about. That's what this fight is about." The room burst into applause, not from everyone, but enough to rattle the walls. Clara's smugness vanished. Karoline smiled, "And by the way, if you want to know who made this dress, I'll be happy to send you the link. I'm sure you'll find it educational." She stepped back from the podium with that signature calm-fire demeanor that had made her a favorite among Trump supporters and a rising conservative star. But this was just the beginning. The moment went viral within minutes. Headlines exploded. Karoline Leavitt turns Made in China jab into pro-America masterclass. White House press secretary claps back with grace and grit. The trade war had a new symbol, and it was wearing a navy blue dress. The moment Karoline Leavitt's sharp response to Clara Winslow went viral, social media caught fire like dry brush in the California hills. Hashtag Karoline claps back. Hashtag Made in America. Hashtag China dress drama. Conservatives hailed it as a masterclass in grace under fire, while liberal media outlets scrambled to downplay it. But back in the White House, Karoline wasn't focused on the hashtags. She was focused on the mission. That night, she sat with President Trump in the Oval Office. The evening news was playing on mute, but the headlines spoke volumes. Karoline Leavitt embarrasses liberal media darling Clara Winslow on trade hypocrisy. President Trump's tariffs spark real conversation at home. Trump leaned back in his chair, the gold curtains behind him glowing with the sunset outside. "Karoline," he said, swirling his Diet Coke, "you were tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. You know what I told Steve Bannon today? I said, we don't need a spokesperson. We've got a sniper. That's what you are. Dead on." Karoline smiled. Thank you, Mr. President. But this is just the start. Clara poked at something we need to lean into, not just defend. If we can make this dress moment a symbol of what Americans are up against, we can turn the conversation around. We show them the struggle is real. Trump nodded. I like it. Hell, I love it. Meanwhile at GDN, Clara Winslow was not having the best night. The clip of her gotcha moment had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making Karoline look like a hypocrite, she'd come off as a petty elitist obsessed with optics while missing the bigger picture. Her producer, James, paced behind her. You made it personal, Clara. That's why it blew up in your face. You mocked her clothes during a national trade crisis. Clara defended herself. I was making a point. How can they push tariffs when they're still feeding China's economy? James stopped. That might have worked if she hadn't turned around and destroyed you in front of the world. She fumed silently. You need to fix this, he added. Fast. The next morning, a storm brews. Back at the White House, the press room was packed again. More than usual. People were waiting to see what Karoline would say next. The moment she entered, the chatter hushed. She stood at the podium in a crisp, all-American red blazer made by a small business in Michigan, just like she had planned. Before we begin, she said, I want to give a quick shout-out to Harper Threads, a veteran-owned company that made this jacket right here in the USA. They've been struggling to compete with foreign imports for years. But with the president's new tariffs, they're finally seeing daylight. Camera flashes lit up the room. And yes, Clara, this one's not made in China, she added with a wink. The room erupted in gasps and laughter. Clara shifted in her seat, trying to hold her expression steady. But her face had turned redder than Karoline's blazer. Karoline didn't stop there. In fact, she continued, we'll be launching a new section on the White House website this week, called Made in America Stories. Every week, we'll highlight real businesses and real workers who are finally getting a shot again. The trade war isn't just about politics. It's about people. A few reporters nodded, some typing furiously. Even some typically liberal-leaning outlets were warming to the idea. Karoline leaned in again. This isn't about guilt trips. This is about giving Americans the choice to support their own. For too long, they haven't had that option. Everything from baby formula to power tools, outsourced, undercut, and out of reach. She paused. But that ends now. Not just with policy, but with pride. A nation reacts. Within hours, Harper Threads reported a 300% spike in orders. Other small businesses began tagging the White House account, asking to be featured next. Talk radio exploded. Conservatives cheered. Independents raised eyebrows. Even some Democrats started to question, had Trump and Leavitt struck a nerve with working Americans? At a diner in Ohio, a waitress named Marla told her local TV station, I don't like Trump, but that girl at the podium? She said what I feel. I'm tired of my paycheck going to products made in countries that hate us. Karoline's dress from the previous day, yes, the one made in China, was now hanging in the White House press office, framed behind glass, under a plaque that read, Where the Movement Began. By the third day, the China dress moment wasn't just a trending story, it had turned into a cultural phenomenon. News anchors debated it. TikTok creators reenacted it. Conservative podcasters dubbed Karoline Leavitt the Iron Rose of the White House, while liberal bloggers scrambled to poke holes in her story. But while the public argued over memes and merchandise behind closed doors, the White House was strategizing for a bigger push. President Trump sat with Karoline in the Roosevelt Room, surrounded by senior aides, charts, and coffee mugs with giant American flags on them. I've been thinking, Trump said, tapping a folder labeled China Response Strategy. We don't just defend the tariffs. We go on offense. We take this moment and build something people can believe in. Karoline leaned in. A movement, Mr. President. A movement grounded in economic patriotism. People are sick of hearing about globalization while their factories close. They want something real. Stephen Miller, seated to the left, nodded. We've never had a better messenger for this than Karoline. She's young, she's sharp, and she just turned a liberal ambush into a national rallying cry. Trump grinned. I knew she was good. But this? She's got Reagan-level instincts. Karoline held up a mock-up of a web page. This is the Made in America Stories landing page. Each story will spotlight an American worker, factory, or small business benefiting from the new trade policies. It'll be emotional, personal, undeniable. Trump slammed the table with enthusiasm. Let's launch it by Friday. And Karoline, wear something red, white, and blue. Let the media try mocking that. Back at GDN headquarters, Clara Winslow paced in her office, her heels clicking nervously against the polished floor. Her inbox was overflowing with hate mail and sarcasm. You got smoked by the press, Barbie. Mock the dress again, Clara, maybe she'll build another factory this time. Your elitism is showing. Even worse, her network's ratings had dropped 11% in the past 2 days. Their usual demographic was tuning out or worse, switching channels. Her producer, James, entered holding a stack of polling data. Bad news, he sighed. Swing voters in Rust Belt states? They're loving the tariffs. And they see Karoline as, get this, relatable. Clara scoffed. Relatable? She works for Donald Trump. James shrugged. Doesn't matter. She wears the same dresses they do. She's fighting for American workers. And she embarrassed you, which made her look like a giant killer. Clara seethed. She wasn't used to losing media battles. I want another chance, she said coldly. Set me up with a front row seat at her next briefing. She won't see me coming this time. The rematch, press briefing showdown. It was Friday. The White House briefing room was more packed than usual. Even international outlets had shown up. Everyone knew something was coming, the launch of the Made in America Stories campaign, but what they really wanted was the sequel to the viral showdown. Karoline stepped up to the podium in a stunning red, white, and navy blue ensemble. A small American flag pin gleamed on her lapel. Good afternoon, she said. Today we're proud to officially launch the Made in America Stories initiative. Every week we'll showcase Americans whose lives are being transformed, not by slogans, but by policy. She clicked a remote. Behind her, a screen lit up showing a man in a hard hat standing beside a conveyor belt in Youngstown, Ohio. This is Dale. For 12 years, his factory was on life support. They couldn't compete with cheap Chinese steel. Then the tariffs came. And now? Dale just got promoted. His son starts at the plant next month. That's what this is all about. The room was silent, respectful. Even some liberal reporters didn't dare interrupt. But then, Clara Winslow stood, microphone in hand. Ms. Leavitt, she said, voice sweet as syrup, isn't this campaign just a flashy distraction from the inflation caused by the tariffs? Americans are still struggling to afford basic goods. Karoline didn't blink. Clara, we've had inflation for years before these tariffs. What we didn't have were options. Tariffs are just the beginning. We're rebuilding the supply chain. We're reshoring jobs. We're reinvesting in our people. Clara jumped in. But what about your dress? You say you're all about American manufacturing now, but you only switched after I pointed it out. Isn't that just damage control? Karoline smiled. You're absolutely right. I made a mistake wearing that dress, and I thanked you for pointing it out. That moment woke me up to just how deep the problem runs. But unlike you, Clara, I don't just criticize. I act. The room buzzed again. I've since partnered with small American fashion brands. I've personally donated to a startup that's hiring single mothers to sew in Pennsylvania. And I wear their clothes proudly, not to make a statement, but to prove it's possible. She looked Clara straight in the eye. So if you're going to keep talking about my outfits, Clara, just remember, every time you do, another American worker gets a job. Boom. The room exploded. Laughter. Applause. Even a few claps from the press corps. Karoline stepped away from the podium. Another flawless victory. The White House briefing exchange between Karoline Leavitt and Clara Winslow was replayed millions of times within 24 hours. Conservative influencers turned Karoline's final line, every time you do, another American worker gets a job, into a rallying cry. It was printed on t-shirts, mugs, bumper stickers, and even billboards across battleground states. Fox News ran a primetime segment titled, The Karoline Effect, Can One Dress Spark an Economic Revolution? The answer to many Americans seemed to be a resounding yes. President Trump, watching the surge in enthusiasm, wasted no time. He hosted a national town hall from a reopened textile mill in North Carolina. Standing with Dale and several other workers featured in the Made in America Stories campaign, Trump turned to Karoline, seated beside the First Lady, and declared, "This young woman right here? She's not just a press secretary. She's a voice for millions. We call it the Trump economy, but she's helping shape the Trump legacy." The crowd roared. Karoline, humbled but confident, responded with a short but powerful speech that electrified the evening. "This isn't about me. It's about us. It's about fighting for dignity in our labor, respect for our work, and pride in what we make. No more apologizing for putting America first. That moment made the evening news in nearly every state. Even Saturday Night Live couldn't resist parodying the now famous exchange, though their attempt to mock Karoline ironically ended up introducing her to an even wider audience, some of whom found her poise and patriotism endearing. Meanwhile, back in the media world, Clara Winslow was burning out. Her inbox was a war zone of insults and gifs of her stunned expression during the briefing. Her editor called her into the office. "Clara," he sighed, "you become the symbol of everything they hate about the liberal elite. You picked the wrong fight." Clara scowled. "So now we just let her win? Let Trump run wild with his dress tariff fairy tale?" Her editor shrugged. "Maybe you should have challenged her on substance instead of couture." "But I was trying to expose hypocrisy." He leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the desk. "Maybe. But here's the difference. Karoline admitted she was wrong. Then she changed. And now she's walking the talk and the country's walking with her." It was a bitter pill. Clara left the office defeated, the city lights of D.C. no longer comforting but mocking. A new voice in the arena. 3 weeks after the viral exchange, Karoline was invited to speak at the National Women's Economic Summit in Arizona. The event typically leaned left, but her presence was a sign of just how deeply the Made in America message had cut across ideological lines. Standing on a sleek stage in front of 8,000 attendees, Karoline opened her remarks with honesty. "I'm not perfect. I made mistakes. But I learned. And I've grown. The question isn't who's right, it's who's willing to do right. And if we, as women, can lead that charge, our country wins." She told stories, not from policy briefs, but from real Americans, a mother in Iowa starting a denim brand, a veteran in Michigan reviving a leather goods factory, a group of former inmates in Texas working in a textile rehab program. She didn't just speak like a press secretary. She spoke like a leader. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. One attendee tweeted, "I didn't think I'd ever agree with a Trump staffer, but Karoline Leavitt just made me rethink everything." Another said, "She's the first politician-adjacent figure I've ever trusted. She's real. And she's fighting for us." The numbers don't lie. As election season heated up, internal polling revealed a surprising trend. 58% of independents supported the new tariffs. Karoline Leavitt had a 57% approval rating among suburban women. A full 62% of small business owners credited the Made in America Stories initiative for helping boost visibility or morale. And then, a bombshell, Karoline was listed as one of the top 10 most admired women in America, right next to Oprah Winfrey and Taylor Swift. She laughed when the president teased her during a press conference. "Maybe I should step down and let Karoline run instead." The media chuckled. But deep down, even her critics knew she had become a force to be reckoned with. It was a cool October evening in Atlanta. The presidential campaign was now in full swing, and the great American manufacturing debate was set to air live on every major network. Though not a candidate, Karoline Leavitt was front and center, invited to represent the White House's trade and manufacturing policy alongside representatives from both parties. To no one's surprise, Clara Winslow was in attendance, covering the debate for her network, though her presence was more subdued than usual. The sting from her viral takedown was still fresh, though weeks had passed. She watched Karoline from the press box, same confident stance, same patriotic grace, same understated dress. But this time her dress had a small but clear tag stitched visibly on the side. "Proudly made in Ohio, United States." The debate hall buzzed with anticipation. When Karoline stepped up to deliver the administration's defense of the 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, she didn't mince words. "For decades, we shipped our factories overseas and told our people to settle for less. That era is over. These tariffs aren't about revenge. They're about rebuilding what we lost, the dignity of work, the pride of production, and the belief that America still makes the best." A few on the panel pushed back, accusing her of economic nationalism and triggering inflation. Karoline stood her ground. "You want to talk about cost? Let's talk about the human cost of dependency. The communities gutted. The dreams stalled. The jobs that vanished. I'll take short-term adjustment over permanent surrender." The audience erupted in applause. Even Clara found herself nodding. A surprise visitor. After the debate, President Trump made a surprise entrance, walking on stage to join Karoline. The crowd leapt to its feet. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder and leaned into the mic. "This woman right here? She doesn't back down. She doesn't fold. And she definitely doesn't care where someone says her dress is made as long as it's not in China. Laughter and cheers filled the room. Then Trump pointed toward the front row. You see Dale over there? He's hiring 100 new workers next month because of these tariffs. Because of belief. Because of Karoline. The cameras panned to Dale, beaming, wiping a tear from his cheek. A country awakens. In the following weeks, the momentum continued. Factories reopened in places the media once dubbed dead towns. School kids toured plants to learn how things were really made. Small towns held Made in America fairs showcasing locally made clothes, tools, gadgets, and even school supplies. And Karoline? She launched a national initiative with Ivanka Trump and First Lady Melania called the American Stitch, a program to fund women-led textile and apparel startups in the U.S. It was bipartisan, wildly successful, and immediately oversubscribed. It was a cool October evening in Atlanta. The presidential campaign was now in full swing, and the Great American Manufacturing Debate was set to air live on every major network. Though not a candidate, Karoline Leavitt was front and center, invited to represent the White House's trade and manufacturing policy alongside representatives from both parties. To no one's surprise, Clara Winslow was in attendance, covering the debate for her network, though her presence was more subdued than usual. The sting from her viral takedown was still fresh, though weeks had passed. She watched Karoline from the press box, same confident stance, same patriotic grace, same understated dress. But this time her dress had a small but clear tag stitched visibly on the side. Proudly made in Ohio, United States. The debate hall buzzed with anticipation. When Karoline stepped up to deliver the administration's defense of the 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, she didn't mince words. For decades, we shipped our factories overseas and told our people to settle for less. That era is over. These tariffs aren't about revenge. They're about rebuilding what we lost, the dignity of work, the pride of production, and the belief that America still makes the best. A few on the panel pushed back, accusing her of economic nationalism and triggering inflation. Karoline stood her ground. You want to talk about cost? Let's talk about the human cost of dependency. The communities gutted. The dreams stalled. The jobs that vanished. I'll take short-term adjustment over permanent surrender. The audience erupted in applause. Even Clara found herself nodding. A surprise visitor. After the debate, President Trump made a surprise entrance, walking on stage to join Karoline. The crowd leapt to its feet. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder and leaned into the mic. This woman right here? She doesn't back down. She doesn't fold. And she definitely doesn't care where someone says her dress is made as long as it's not in China. Laughter and cheers filled the room. Then Trump pointed toward the front row. You see Dale over there? He's hiring 100 new workers next month because of these tariffs. Because of belief. Because of Karoline. The cameras panned to Dale, beaming, wiping a tear from his cheek. A country awakens. In the following weeks, the momentum continued. Factories reopened in places the media once dubbed dead towns. School kids toured plants to learn how things were really made. Small towns held Made in America fairs showcasing locally made clothes, tools, gadgets, and even school supplies. And Karoline? She launched a national initiative with Ivanka Trump and First Lady Melania called the American Stitch, a program to fund women-led textile and apparel startups in the U.S. It was bipartisan, wildly successful, and immediately oversubscribed.